Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you so much for joining the third cohort of the Rural Women's Ag-cademy in St. Kitts and Nevis, delivered to you by Helen's Daughters. My name is Keithlyn Carew. I am the Executive Director of Helen's Daughters. I'm sure some of you had probably met me during our community workshops, whether it was in St. Kitts, whether it was in Nevis. We are so grateful and thankful that you are here today. You've made it. So we have a very fun, fulfilling, and packed 8 weeks for you. We're going to take you through a number of areas within the agricultural sector. As we know, some of you are into raw production, some of you are into agro-processing, some of you are into livestock. So we are going to try our best to cover all of those facets. Before the beginning of the Ag-cademy, last Saturday, I believe, my colleague Kim shared instructions, the guidelines for the Ag-cademy along with the digital journal. So I will go into the guidelines and the digital journal before handing you over to our very, very special and expert facilitator, Mr. McLevin Markey-Tross, who will take you through the first few sessions on sustainable agriculture. So ladies, if you just give me a few seconds, I'm just going to pull up the Ag-cademy guidelines just so that we're really clear about what we are going to do during this session. Well, during these sessions and this program. So once again, welcome to the Rural Women's Ag-cademy. So who we are, what is this about? Maybe you just signed up and you're trying to figure out exactly what you're here for or what Helen's Daughters is or who Helen's Daughters is. And Helen's Daughters is a nonprofit organization that works within 3 Caribbean countries, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And it works at a grassroots level, providing capacity development training, such as what you're in today, mentorship, microinvestment, access to high-value markets, and a structured care system for rural women farmers, much like yourself. On the advocacy front, our organization uses partnerships with the media and the public and private sectors to address gender inequalities and try to seek opportunities for female farmers, as well as putting food security and climate resilience in the public and policy agenda. In this way, Helen's Daughters, we're not of the belief that we're only training you in agriculture, but we're of the belief that we're training you as sustainable development leaders for the Caribbean region. So use this Ag-cademy honestly as a jumping point, I would say. And for those of you who would stick with Helen's Daughters, there's a lot more in store for you. So what is a Rural Women's Ag-cademy? It is an initiative that provides access to free virtual coursework and practical experience in sustainable agriculture and agribusiness development. So in this course, we cover things such as climate resilience, post-harvest management, food safety, financial literacy, agribusiness development, and agritourism. As I mentioned, the program is completely free, and we will try our best to continue to ensure that our programming and training is completely free to strengthen your capacity as female women farmers in agri-entrepreneurship and so on. So, the guidelines. One of the first guidelines, because I already hear persons unmuting themselves, is please, ladies, while we have a rather large group and because we don't want to disrupt speakers, we ask that you remain mute at all times unless otherwise spoken to, or perhaps there has been an area where you can unmute yourselves to provide responses to answers, or if you have questions and so forth. So first things first, access to the virtual class. This is an 8-week course that will take place on Zoom. The link to the Zoom class will be sent via our WhatsApp group and through email as you received. Your full name should be used in the Zoom room in order to identify yourself. No alias is allowed. Ladies, so please, your first name and your last name. Because we have a rather large group, as I've mentioned, we are using an app that basically registers the names of those that are in the Zoom room. So I've noticed some persons saying that they have some issues trying to switch their names, which we can do for you. So just let us know in advance if you're not able to do so, and we'd be happy to change your name. Typically, we take attendance around 6:20. So please ensure we give you a 20-minute grace period to get into the class. After that, we're not taking attendance. And remember that I will go into course completion, but you are required, if you do want to get a certificate from this course, to at least attend 80% of the classes. All the videos and class materials will be recorded and posted on, actually, this mentions the HD Facebook group. However, we've changed to YouTube because we noticed that not everybody has Facebook, but YouTube you can access widely without having to sign up and so forth. My colleague Kim, you probably got an email from admin@helensdaughters.org where there was a link to the YouTube. Don't worry if you're trying to find the link and so forth. It will be shared once again in the WhatsApp group as soon as the recording of this meeting is done. Please know that you need to participate in the live sessions. Just because you watch the recording and we're not able to attend, we have no way of knowing that. So you have to participate in the live sessions in order to actually get the certificate. Class schedule and details. The program will run every Tuesday, 6 to 8 p.m. and Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. from the 22nd of August to 12th October, 2023. And each class, unless otherwise mentioned, will consist of 2 segments, a live lecture and a question and answer segment. So we will break into segments so that participants are allowed to ask questions through our chat room. Please note that we welcome all questions, and they can be sent via the live chat, or they can be asked during the Q&A segment using the raised hand icon below. I know that was a lot, but it's fairly easy. What we do, because we have only 2 hours, and honestly, we have a lot to push in 2 hours. Ideally, we wanted to make this course 12 weeks, but we understand as women, you have other responsibilities and so forth. So we're trying to pack a lot in a little bit of time, which is why I ask for the first hour, unless the facilitator decides to do something different, that you give them a chance to go through their first hour of presentation, and then you'll have another hour for question and answers. In addition to this, the facilitators are always available after the sessions. If perhaps you include questions within the WhatsApp group and so forth, we'd be happy to send it to the facilitators so that they could actually assess them and then respond to them, and we can respond whether it's individually via WhatsApp and so forth. Classroom conduct. Ladies, this is a safe space. Safe space meaning that you agree to maintain a respectful and courteous demeanor towards your fellow course participants and your facilitators. Any behavior deemed disrespectful, discourteous, or profane will be subject to immediate removal from the course. Ladies, we are trying to not only learn together, but to also create a really conducive and positive environment and experience for each and every participant and facilitator, which is why it's important to really, 1, respect the views of others, even though you may not necessarily agree with those views. 2, be an active listener. Listen first, respond after. And finally, be encouraging, be supportive. We are all in this together, so we just ask for positive vibes, good energy, so that we can finish these 8 weeks together on a high. And finally, attendance and course completion. Please note, as I've mentioned, that in order for participants to graduate from this course, you would need to complete at least 13 out of the 16 classes that are provided. Again, attendance will be taken at each class, and there will be a graduation ceremony, something to look out for at the end of the course for all the successful participants. So ladies, please, again, if you have any issues, just let us know. We can also rename you. If you have any issues with trying to attend, please, as we did mention the times and so forth, but just let us know. It's not 100% of the classes that you have to attend, 80%. So really try our best, because we are really trying for you. And finally, for questions, requests, and anything else we can help you with, please email us at admin@helensdaughters.org or send a message to our Ag-cademy WhatsApp group. So that's the guidelines. So I will just quickly go through the digital journal, which was sent to each and every one of you as well, via email. If you give me 1 second, I will grab the digital journal really quickly. Alrighty. Okay. So everyone should have received this Helen's Daughter's digital journal. And what this is not just for the Ag-cademy, but it really is a lifelong tool for you, especially something that you can use, I think, within your business. We've had a number of women who have used this as a starting point to one, establishing and finalizing their business plans, using this to go to banks for loans. So it's actually a very, very key tool and something to, quite simply, if you're not ready to get to accessing loans or establishing your business, for note-taking as well. But I think it's also a way to keep yourself accountable and to have goals. So throughout this digital journal, first things first, is that you will have your entire curriculum. So you'll know who exactly and who's exactly teaching the sessions and what sessions that will be taught as well. Then, so every single thing from sustainable agriculture, agribusiness development, nutritional marketing, food safety, financial literacy, and agritourism will all be covered. The next thing, in each section, you will find that there is a learning log. And what is a learning log? Essentially, it asks you questions such as what you did today, how you felt about it, what you think about it and didn't want to say, how well did it go, how badly did it go, what did you learn? So essentially, it's pushing you to think outside of the session. It's pushing you to write down your thoughts, how you would do things differently within the session, what questions you would ask, what have you achieved, and each section has a learning log. Some sections have a bit more than just the learning log, like for example, agribusiness development. You will find the tools to create a business plan. So basically the essentials of a business plan, key elements of a business plan, and a lean canvas, or basically a one-page business plan, something that can guide you to the full development of a business plan as well. So please use these. For nutritional marketing, we have the learning log. Food safety is another one with a bit more, where you actually have the plan to create a template, sorry, to create a food safety plan. So you can go through these things. It asks you a number of questions, like things like irrigation, using chemical pesticides, how do you have employees or family members working on the land, and so forth. And then aside from the questionnaire, it has examples of what should be included in a food safety plan for your farm. And then obviously a template so that you can put together your own food safety plan. And all of these are, as well as sanitation worksheet examples, best practices for food safety, and so forth. And financial literacy, you will find things, for example, like your income statement. And agritourism ends with, again, another learning log. Now, again, I believe that this tool is really, really incredible to use. So I urge each and one of you to use it. You can print this. If you feel more comfortable in writing it down, writing in it, you can, as you can see, I'm typing into it right now. It is editable as well in PDF. So, ladies, now that we've gone through the guidelines, we've gone through the digital journal, I'm just opening up the class before introducing your speaker to see if there's anyone who has any questions, any comments. Please feel free to use the raise hand function before we go straight into our amazing sustainable agriculture session with Mr. Mackie Truss. So let me know, any questions, any comments? Okay. So I guess we're just ready to get into the session then. So, okay, not at the moment. All right, understood. So, ladies, Is there someone? I see two persons who are unmuted. Did you have questions or comments?
Is that no?
Yes.
No, that's an error on my part. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem, no problem. Okay. Okay. All right, ladies. Well, I mean, Mr. McClever and Mackie Trust really doesn't need an introduction because while I was in St. Kitts and Nevis, I noticed that I think he was known pretty much across the two islands. We are very proud to have Mr. Mackie Trust not only as our sustainable agriculture facilitator, but also as a board member of Helen's Daughters. Mackie has also been awarded, I believe, the award for excellence in agriculture in St. Kitts and Nevis. And while he has a technology background and also a technology business, Mackie is also very well known for his produce at A1 Farms, not only supplying Nevis, but also St. Kitts as well. I think Mackie is one of the pioneers in the Caribbean region when it comes to greenhouse technologies. And I think what is more endearing is the fact that he is passionate about the success of agriculturists, about the success of women agriculturists, as he is one boy out of 8 sisters, I believe. So there is very much a passion for seeing women win. And again, I think that there is so much to learn from Mr. Tross, from his beginnings into agriculture and how he got to this point. And I think his story is really inspiring for all of us to see the levels that we can attain within the agricultural sector. So with that being said, I want to introduce to you, many of you, as I know, already know him, Mr. Mackie Tross. Thank you once again, ladies, and do enjoy this session.
Thank you, Kathleen, and good evening to all the ladies, 54 new sisters that I have. As Kathleen mentioned, I'm the only boy within the family. I've got 8 sisters and I've just got 54 more. So I want to welcome each and every one of you to the Academy and most importantly to the first session. And we would be talking about sustainable agriculture. Now, Caitlin did such a superb job that I really don't need to go back and reintroduce myself. Sufficing to say, though, that I really didn't start out in agriculture. I started as a biomedical engineer. I did that for about 10 years. I moved back from Canada to St. Kitts Nevis, and then opened a computer company where I did some networking. Did that in 2002. The company is still operating at number 4 Hawkins Plaza here in Nevis on Main Street. But I grew up in agriculture. I grew up with my father, who was a carpenter. And those days, most of the men in Nevis especially were doing some agriculture, some subsistence agriculture to help out on the family front. So my dad was no different. And so I had some insights from a very early age, but really it wasn't until maybe 2010. Always had a little thing in the backyard, but only until 2010 when my son brought home an agricultural project that we decided to make it a family event. And that really, in a nutshell, was a springboard to A1 Farms, because that project did so well. We just didn't plant 2 seedlings and see how they matured and took the notes. We planted 72 seedlings of tomato and nurtured them from those seedlings up to maturity. And the returns really was astonishing. And so we just decided after that, and I think it was a ploy on my wife's behalf, on her side, to kind of keep me at home in the afternoons as well. So, you know, you ladies are very smart. So yeah, that is in a nutshell, a quick synopsis of how A1 farms got started and so on. So the subject matter at hand, sustainable agriculture. A minute, let me pull my slide up.
Would you like me to control the slides, Maggie? Would that be?
I could start and then see where we need to go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All right. In terms of sustainable agriculture, we're going to be dealing with some core topics under sustainable agriculture. Soil health, which would be the first one, water resource management, climate change, protective agriculture, but these are just some broad topics. And so over the next 4 sessions, we are going to concentrate on each one and divulge into them accordingly. Now, permit me to ask, and feel free to answer, guys. When you hear sustainable agriculture, what do you think? What do you consider to be sustainable in terms of agriculture? Anyone can answer. And feel free to answer. Any takers?
Consider it. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that I think with us living, in the Caribbean and being prone to hurricanes and other pestilences and things that could upset an agribusiness. So when I think of sustainable agriculture, we're sort of coming up with a plan for the event of those types of things.
Okay, that's good. Someone else? Need about 3, 4. Someone else, please.
We have Desiree Ward. Carrie, you can go ahead.
I think it is protecting the environment, its natural resources, and the non-renewable resources. That's all I can think of.
Very good. Someone else?
We have Akeisha.
Keisha, go ahead, please.
I think of the improvement of the quality of life, production, profitably, enhancing any kind of natural life, soil health, things of that nature.
Good. One more, please.
I would say finding ways, different ways, new ways to progress without damaging, in a holistic manner, and progress as a whole, as a community, without damaging others.
Very good. Now, there's several schools of thought once it comes to sustainable agriculture. I think this definition sums it up quite well. Sustainable agriculture is farming in sustainable ways, meeting society's present food and textile needs without compromising the ability for current or future generations to meet their needs. It consists of environment-friendly methods of farming that allows the production of crops and livestock without the damage to humans and natural systems. So someone mentioned keeping the systems intact. Very good. Now, I've broken it down into 3 different sections, really. Society or people, the economy, and the environment, which is, you could say, the planet. So these 3 sections really is what we're trying to have coexist at the same time. And one shouldn't be of detriment to the next. So, for example, the food quality and food safety, that should always be paramount. Crop and animal health and their welfare should be paramount as well, because we humans depend on the food supply for income and for sustenance. And then we want to be able to have a good environment to live in. We want good soil, healthy soil, clean and fresh water, air that is full of, is free of pollutants, and good biodiversity. Now, once we have these things in place, then we could really think about sustainable agriculture. So that in itself is just the definition of sustainable agriculture. It is not limited to that because, like I say, there's several different schools of thought, but this gives you a good idea as to what we are talking about when we mention sustainable agriculture. Now, let's talk about the benefits of sustainable agriculture. And there are several. Among those are it preserves biodiversity. We need to avoid deforestation, protect health and safety of our communities, protect economic viability of farming and farmers, ensure soil conservation, maintain good water quality, and we have to farm in such a way as to bear in mind the local conditions and our capacity to farm and be sustainable in those conditions. We realize that sometimes we talk to people from North America, and they marvel because we import so much food. And one of the things that they marvel about is that the weather is conducive to farming all year round.
Yeah.
The difficulty is sometimes, though, and we could relate to a couple of months ago, even now, the weather conditions could be really treacherous at times. We experience some real hot temperatures from May right down to now, I would say. And so, although we have quote unquote good weather conditions all year round, no snow storms, no, not like that, no extreme cold temperatures, we have to be mindful of the environment in which we live. Sometimes, like I said, the heat could be very difficult in terms of producing quality produce on a daily basis. So we have to find ways to mitigate against the heat and other conditions, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. So let's talk about some of the key components of sustainable agriculture. And sustainability and sustainable agriculture covers a whole spectrum, really. I pulled out some of the main points, but it's not limited to these at all. We're trying to, over the next 8 weeks, bring you a wholesome course, so to speak, on sustainable agriculture and agribusiness, and in order to make us all better people in our society. So soil management, and then we talk about soil health. I once read that soil health is a man's wealth. And I guess you would realize and agree with me at the end of the session why the soil and the health of the soil is so important. Now, if we're going to plant, we need to manage our crops. So crop management is another important factor. Water resource management. Sometimes we take water for granted, except when we hit the dry periods or the droughts and they start to shed the water. And I could remember maybe about a month or so ago in Nevis, and for quite a while in St. Kitts, we had to shut water off in the evening to let the wells recharge. And it's only then the awareness started to surface as to how we should conserve and the need to conserve water. So water resource management is a big deal here in the Caribbean. pest and disease management, and waste management. That's also a serious issue. Climate change, not much we could do with climate change except to mitigate against the change in the climate as we see fit. And so that brings us to protective agriculture, where we talk about shade houses, greenhouses, even mulching, cover crops, and so on. Innovation and technology, we know that Israel has been leading in the innovation and technology as it relates to agriculture, and we could learn a thing or two from them. Now, later on, another facilitator would look at the market linkages and how you could get your produce from farm to the supermarkets, to your agribusinesses, and so on. What you do after you harvest your crops, post-harvest management is another key area. Food security is paramount. And then we need to be able to manage our financial resources. So financial literacy is a must as well. And that would be explored a little bit later on in the upcoming classes. We mentioned soil health. What really is soil health? Soil health is defined by the level to which it can continually provide multiple functions to sustain plants, animals, and human lives. And we know if we've got healthy plants and animals, usually we would have a healthy population. The management goal for a healthy agricultural soil is to supply the nutrients needed for optimal plant growth in the right quantity and at the right time, while minimizing nutrient losses to the surrounding environment. Now, that's a mouthful. But what we're trying to say here is that it is very important that we don't water too much, because overwatering would wash away the nutrients from the plant roots and so on. But we will divulge in that a little bit later as well. It's important to note here, though, the health of the soil determines how profitable and sustainable your farming enterprise will be. Healthy soil is the foundation of productive, sustainable agriculture. I think that is worth repeating. The health of the soil determines how profitable and sustainable your farming enterprise will be. Healthy soil is the foundation of productive, sustainable agriculture. Now, think about it. My parents and my dad used to say the soil is fat. This is fat soil. And when you're dealing with fat soil, you get big potatoes, big yams, big cassava, that kind of stuff. So in a nutshell, that is what we're really talking about. Now, just have a glance to the right of your screen. And we're talking two things here. We're talking soil health and we're talking human health. If we have a healthy soil, it means therefore that we should have healthy humans, because we are what we eat. And we know that healthy soil produces healthy plants and healthy animals. And from those healthy plants and healthy animals, we get good nutrition. And on the ecosystem side, if we have a good ecosystem, we have good environmental health, human and environment interaction is good, and therefore we should have healthy humans as well. Now, before we move on, I would want to interject here and tell you that one of the world's most prominent and leading soil scientists is the Dr. Charles Kellogg. And he said, essentially, all life depends on the soil. There can be no life without soil, and there can be no soil without life. They have evolved together and they will remain together. So what he's saying is that we need to take care of the soil, and then the soil will take care of us. We could now look at the management practices, or some of it, to improve the soil health. You would hear the term reduce inversion tillage or inversion tillage and soil traffic. Inversion tillage is a fancy word for plowing. That's all it is. Then we have to manage the nutrients, and that is the nutrients in the soil. We have to increase the organic matter inputs. We have to reduce the pesticide use and provide a better habitat for beneficial organisms. We should not leave the soil bare. We should always use a cover crop. When we can't use a cover crop, we should resort to some form of mulching to just protect the topsoil. Crop rotation and cropping and crop management is a very important tool as well. And I know we have some livestock farmers among us. So good animal husbandry practices is essential. Now, these topics, I would break them down one by one and give you a little bit more insight of what we mean when we talk, for example, about inversion tillage. We're encouraged now to reduce inversion tillage, and like I say, it's just a fancy name for plowing, and the traffic on the soil. There's benefits for plowing, and we know that the plowing increases oxygen in the soil. It stimulates microbial activity and results in decomposition of organic matter. However, excessive tillage is harmful to soil health in several ways. Overtilling disrupts the soil aggregates, the actual structure of the soil, exposing particles of organic matter that had been physically protected within the aggregates for microbial consumption. Microbial consumption is referring to the microorganisms in the soil. Very important for the survival of plants. In addition, the additions of organic matter are not sufficient to counteract the losses from decomposition. Organic matter levels will decline over time, reducing soil health. Inversion tillage also reduces the soil coverage provided by crop residues, leaving soil more exposed to erosion. Conservation tillage is therefore recommended. Now, we know sometimes we pass some fields and they're just plowed, and they're left there without any kind of cover on them and exposed to wind and rain. If we get rains as we had here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I would say throughout the OECS for the last 4 or 5 days, we would realize that a lot of those fields that were left barren, for better want of words, some of the topsoil got eroded, washed away, and so on, especially in areas where the soil is a little bit sandy. So we're really encouraged not to leave the soil bare for any long periods of time. Okay? Now, what I would do now is to just introduce you to a little video that would put what I've said so far into context, summarizes it. So just give a listen.
How do you make a farm or ranch more sustainable? There's no single answer, but there are some common practices.
Can everyone hear?
Yes.
Can
Used by producers across the country to improve profitability, quality of life, and environmental stewardship. So in this episode, let's look at conservation tillage and soil health. Now, it used to be that every farmer in town would till their fields after harvest to get ready for spring planting. Now, besides burning a lot of time and fuel, we now know that tillage does a lot of harm to the soil. Tillage kills beneficial soil organisms and makes organic matter break down faster. And under intensive tillage, the soil loses its structure and gets compacted. Now, when this happens, rain can't soak into the soil like it should. Without a mat of residue on top or living plant roots down below, bare soil washes or blows away easily during storms. And over time, all of this makes it harder to grow a healthy crop. Now, it's tempting to use more tillage to fix these problems, but that only makes things worse. Now, more farmers are retiring their conventional tillage equipment and turning to conservation tillage instead. So the goal of conservation tillage is to disturb the soil as little as possible, with no-till and reduced tillage methods that leave at least 30% of the residue from your previous crop on the soil's surface. Now, during heavy rains, this extra residue acts like armor that protects the soil from eroding and slows down water loss when the weather turns hot and dry. Over time, we see even more benefits. The organisms in the soil thrive and feed on organic matter. The structure of the soil gets better, organic matter increases, and the soil becomes more porous and fertile. These well-structured soils let in moisture and air and let crop roots more easily reach the water and nutrients they need. But we shouldn't think of no-till as the end of the story. When we diversify our crop rotations to include cover crops, forages, and high residue crops, we add even more organic matter to the soil and accelerate those benefits of no-till. So think of conservation tillage as one part of a whole farm solution. Combined with other practices that improve the soil, no-till systems can help us reduce compaction, cycle nutrients, capture moisture, manage pests, sequester carbon, and protect water quality. There's much more to learn about conservation tillage and sustainable agriculture. You can start exploring today.
Trying to get to the next screen, it's stuck.
In the meantime, I have it up for the participants, Maggie.
Okay, just give me a second, let me see if I can get out of this. All right. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties a while ago. So I think that video summarizes some of the sustainable practices that we should all be encouraged to keep going. Now, in terms of the nutrients, we should always manage or try and manage the nutrients as well. And these are the nutrients that are in the soil for the plant. Carefully planning the timing, the application method, and the quantity of manure, compost, and other fertilizers will allow you to meet crop nutrients demand, minimize nutrient excesses and deficiencies. So you have to have some kind of system. You can't, especially when you're adding manure, it is advisable to make sure that the manure is cured you just don't take it from the pen and put it straight into the field or to the plants. You run the risk of burning those plants because the manure itself is too harsh. It's not in a ready state to be administered to the soil. So that is one of the things that we have to be mindful of, especially manure from a chicken. The chicken manure is very, very high in nitrogen and is good for leafy crops like lettuce and kale and callaloo and so on. But you want to let it sit until it's cured. And when it's cured, you'll know, because it would turn almost like sand, really, really granular. So that's that's how you know when it's ready. Healthy, vigorous plants that grow quickly are better able to withstand pest damage. Just like if your body is weak, you catch cold very easily. If the plant is not vigorous, growing well, then it's susceptible to diseases and pests. For example, pathogens, what we call white flies would attack, and maybe fungus and so on. So you want to have healthy plants. And over-fertilizing crops can increase pest problems as well. Increasing soluble nitrogen levels in plants can decrease their resistance to pests, resulting in higher pest density and crop damage. Now, you would hear people talk about the soil pH, and different crops require different or grow well in different soil pHs. For example, a crop like tomato, the soil pH might be 5.8 on the acidic side. I'm sure that a lot of you, sometimes when you taste the tomato, you realize that there's a little bit of acid in the tomato. But the plant itself thrives very well when the pH is a little bit acidic. So you have to have the appropriate pH for the crop to be grown, and this will improve the nutrient availability and reduce the toxins and so on. Maintaining adequate calcium levels will help earthworms thrive and improve soil aggregation. Now, when I was growing up, I used to find pleasure in killing earthworms. Now I know totally different, because the earthworms are very, very healthy for your soil. What they do is that they almost like they bore through the soil, creating air pockets and allowing the water to infiltrate into the soil and so on. So when you see the earthworms and other organisms in the soil, it really tells you that your soil is healthy. Using diverse nutrient solution can help maintain soil health. Manure and compost add organic matter as well as an array of nutrients, but using just compost or manure to meet the nitrogen needs of the crop every year can result in excessive phosphorus levels. So you have to have a wholesome approach. You just can't be adding one set of fertilizer all the time. Otherwise, that would throw something else off. Combining modest manure or compost additions to meet phosphorus needs with additional nitrogen inputs from legumes, cover crops, or forage crops in a crop rotation can help balance both the nitrogen and the phosphorus inputs. Now, this might sound like foreign territory to you guys, but later on, it would all come together. Now, we mentioned the organic matter inputs. To maintain or increase soil organic matter levels, inputs of organic matter must meet or exceed the losses of organic matter due to decomposition. So what we're saying here is that there's a need to keep adding organic matter, because sometimes you know that the manure or your compost would decompose over time and loses its value to the crop. So there's a need to keep adding as we go along. Healthy crops can be a valuable source of organic matter, and crop residues should be returned to the soil to the extent possible. So when we're clearing the land, we don't want to remove everything from the land. The little shrubs should remain, and the dry leaves and so on should remain. I've seen instances where people clear the land and then they go and they take a rake and they rake up all of the banana leaves, all of the wild leaves, and everything like that. But you're doing more harm than if you leave them, because what we're saying here is that the organic matter and the crop residue should be returned to the soil. Incorporation of cover crops or perennial crops and judicious additions of animal and green manure and compost can also be used to increase or maintain soil organic matter. So we're seeing that even when you cut your banana trees down, the banana trunk and the leaves should be cut and left right on the soil. They in turn would break down over time and add good organic matter back to the soil. They add, you could look at it as mulching as well, so it's multi-purpose, and that mulching would basically keep moisture in the soil, because it would form almost like an armor so that the sun doesn't hit the soil directly and evaporate the moisture from the soil as quickly. Soil organic matter content can be monitored over time. For example, the appearance in the crop and the yield. Now, sometimes when you look at the soil have a very, very dark, almost like a black color. That would tell you that the soil is full with organic matter. When the soil is it's together, when the soil is very loose, definitely would give you a sign that this soil could do with some organic matter to hold the particles together. Sorry. I'm hopeful that in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I know they were doing it before, and I really can't say for sure that they're still doing it, but we should be able to request a soil test from the Agriculture Department here in Nevis and in St. Kitts as well. I know for sure there was a lab in St. Kitts that was doing some soil testing, and a few years ago there was some mapping that was done around St. Kitts and Nevis to tell you, okay, if you live in Cairn, this is a soil type generally. If you live in Gingerland, what the soil type is. If you're in Sadlers, what the soil type is, and so on. I think the Taiwanese was responsible for doing that. So that could be had and should be still available from the Agriculture Department as well. Now, in terms of the pesticide use, we're encouraged to reduce the use of the pesticides to provide a better habitat for beneficial organisms. Beneficial insects that contribute to biological control or pest organisms can be harmed by the application of broad spectrum insecticides. Now, we see some farmers, whether commercial or backyard, that would just take the knapsack sprayer and just spray until it's finished without any care or attention and any thought of the damage that they may be doing to the biological insects in the soil. So one has to be very careful. If you see 1 or 2 white flies, that doesn't give you the license to just spray as if there's no tomorrow. Okay, you spray when it's the last resort, really. Now, farmscaping methods include the use of insectary plants, hedgerows, cover crops, water reservoirs to attract and support populations of beneficial organisms such as insects, spiders, amphibians, reptiles, bats, and birds that parasitize or prey on the harmful pest. Now, we want to be able to attract these beneficial insects to our farms and to the environment in which we are farming, because every one of them have their role to play. Sometimes we see the pelicans around and they're doing their job. They're eating the worms. Some of them, they're just taking away the harmful pests, really. It's just like the ladybug. The ladybug feeds on the white flies and so on. So all of these reptiles and birds and so on have their use in this space. So we need to preserve the environment for that. Farmscape placed in contours between fields, steep ditches, or places that are easily eroded give stability to the soil. Sometimes we have to plant hedges because of the terrains to protect the runoff water. Because sometimes if we don't, we would get a lot of washout and a lot of erosion and topsoil erosion and so on. So farmscaping can also be used as a filter strip to prevent water runoff and soil erosion. Now we spoke a little bit about cover crops. We're encouraged not to leave the soil bare of a cover, whether it be a cover crop, mulch, as you see on the right-hand side of the screen. We should always try our best to cover the soil to protect it from erosion. And cover crops are good examples of this. The biomass produced by cover crops is usually returned to the soil. For example, if you have, say, a field of string beans, we are encouraged to leave the stalk of the string beans after we would have harvested the string beans and just incorporate it back into the soil, all right, as a form of organic matter. Cover crops with tap roots can create micropores or macropores, sorry, and alleviate compaction. So these tap roots, like carrots and beet and radish and even papaya trees, if you check the papaya tree, a lot of us doesn't think of the papaya tree as having a taproot, but they've got some big taproots that really goes through and form some macropores in the soil. And this would kind of promote the aggregation and stabilize the soil. It also provides a pathway for water to channel itself down through the aggregates of the soil as well. Species of cover crops that host microphyzal fungi can sustain and increase the population of these beneficial fungi. Legume crops or cover crops can add nitrogen So, like I mentioned before, the legumes, peas, beans, anything like that can add nitrogen directly back to the soil. So cover crops can retain nitrates and other nutrients that are susceptible when it comes to leaching losses. And leaching is fancy word of saying excess runoff, too much water, overwatering. What happens is that when we overwater, we wash away some of the valuable nutrients that the crops require. Now, crop rotation. Crop rotation has been practiced for several centuries, really. It's one of the older techniques for soil management and for healthy soil. We are encouraged not to plant the same crop in the same space, crop cycle after crop cycle. If you plant something like a legume this time, you may want to plant something else like tomato or sweet pepper or something like that. I would ask you now to just give a listen as I play this little video that would summarize crop rotation.
Crop rotation. Some places are suitable for cultivation of only few crops. For example, in India, rice is grown in approximately 34% of the overall crop territory of the country. To get maximum yield, farmers grow same type of crop at same place again and again. This leads to reduction in availability of nutrients. But growing different crops can help retain nutrients. There are plants which are home to microorganisms that convert atmospheric nitrogen gas to nutrient. Leguminous plants have root nodes which are home to bacteria such as Rhizobium. These bacteria depend on plants for food, and in exchange, they convert atmospheric nitrogen to nitrogen nutrients. Plant and bacteria form a symbiotic relationship. Some nutrients get absorbed by plants and rest mixes in soil. Gram, groundnut, wheat are examples of leguminous plants. When a different crop is grown after the crop of leguminous plants, excessive nutrients, which were mixed in soil, are utilized by it. Cultivation of different crops at a place in different seasons is known as crop rotation. Crop rotation results in increment of soil fertility.
Mr. Trust, you are muted.
Muted. Sorry about that, inadvertently. Crop management. Let's spend a minute and talk about crop management, because this all ties into soil. Crop management begins with the sowing of seeds, continues with the maintenance during growth and development, and ends with crop harvest. After crop harvest, we have to talk about storage and the distribution of the harvest itself. Now, seed selection. And this is very important because I've seen farmers who want to purchase the cheapest seeds and expect to get the best fruits from them. It doesn't work like that. So good quality seeds are essential to grow a strong and healthy crop, no matter how good your soil health is. If you don't have good seeds, you're wasting your time. Healthy seeds can be bought from trusted sources, or the farmers themselves can produce their own seeds. And in this case, the seed selection can be used to improve the quality and the quantity of the yields. Now, let me pause for a minute and say here that a lot of farmers are very, very guilty of selling off all of their best fruits, their best tomatoes, and then the little squeezy tomatoes, they want to reap or harvest the seeds from them and expect to get good quality tomatoes the next time around. It really, really doesn't work like that. I've seen it with papaya as well. Papaya look nice. So yes, this is one to go on the market table. And then when the papaya crop is finishing now, they're scrunting to harvest seeds from papaya that are really small and sucky, for better want of words, and then expect to use those same seeds and get good quality papaya next time around. It doesn't work like that. So you have to save a few of the healthier fruits to harvest seeds from if you're going to harvest your own seeds. And care must be taken with those seeds once they're harvested. You must keep them in a cool place, maybe in the refrigerator. Definitely not outside exposed to the extreme sun and heat that we've been having. Now, there are several diseases that are transmitted via the seeds. And if seeds from an infested field are used to grow the next crop, these seed-borne diseases will immediately cause serious problems. Seed selection should thus start by obtaining seeds from healthy plants and by extension, healthy fruits. Always use seeds from the best fruits. No matter how you think you want to put the best avocado on the table to sell, use that for yourself and treat yourself and save the seed to plant the next avocado. I really want to spend a minute, since I'm on seeds, to dispel a myth about seeds in general. Now, I'm not quite sure how well you could see my screen, but I'll spell it out so that you would understand. There's three types of seed, really. The heirloom seed, the hybrid seed, and the GMO seeds. Now, the heirloom seed is a seed that has been produced by open pollination year in, year out. It's almost like that heirloom is the original seed, is a seed from the original plant, basically. So you plant a crop of tomatoes this year, you save some tomatoes next year from that same plant, you harvest the seed, and then you replant them, and you save, and you replant, and so on. So it's open pollination, there's no cross-pollination, there's nothing at all like that. That's what we call a heirloom seed. The hybrid now is one that is artificially or cross-pollinated. And sometimes these seeds, if you replant them, you would not get back the same characteristics. And we'll see that later on. Now, GMO, and this is where a lot of people get nervous around here. But GMO seeds are seeds that are produced artificially by altering the DNA of the genes and so on. Now, before we go any further, let me tell you that these seeds are really geared for mass production, thousands and thousands of acres of land of say corn or soybeans or whatever it is. And they're very, very expensive. So we here in the Caribbean really don't have to worry about GMO seeds because we're not able to buy them and we don't have lands enough to get the value from them because they're very expensive and you would have to plant on a mass scale to even start to recoup your investment for the seed itself. All right. I could spell it out a little bit more, but I think we've got the gist when it comes to the difference in the characteristics of the different seeds. Spoke about seed. I think I'm missing a slide here. Let's see if we get it back. Okay. Seedling care. Usually, I would sow my seeds in a 50 cell tray. A lot of people opt for 72. But what I find is that the 50 cell tray, the cells are a little bit bigger, and it gives the seedling and the root system a little bit more space to develop. So I'm a little bit biased when it comes to the 50 cell tray, because I believe that once you start a seedling, once you get healthy seedling, you would then move on to healthy plants and therefore have a healthy crop and fruits and so on. And for germination, the best method to germinate is to do it in a dark environment, less light for germination. And once you have germinated your seeds, then you could expose the seed to light and so on. Now, just a little trick that I normally do. I normally would soak my seedlings in a watering tray, as you would see on the right-hand side, bottom right-hand side of the screen. What this does is protect the seedling from water pouring over it. So what's happening is that you submerge the tray itself into the water, and by osmosis, the seedlings would suck up the water. Most seedlings like lettuce and tomato and cabbage and so on would take 3 to 4 weeks to get ready from seed to transplant. But you have others like cucumber, pumpkin, and so on that would, and how could I forget? Cucumber would take a lot less time, like 7 to 10 days, and they're ready to go. They've got a true leaf, so you might as well get them started. So I just thought I should put in some seedling and tell you how to care for them and so on. We've got some livestock farmers among us, I understand, so I try to cover all the bases. Livestock as it relates to soil health. There's some advantages, some disadvantages as well. The livestock plays a very important and crucial role in maintaining the health of the soil by providing manure, which is a rich source of soil organic matter and carbon, really. A sustainable use of manure can improve soil fertility by increasing nutrients available for plant and microbial diversity, as well as reducing soil erosion and water loss. Now, in terms of the livestock, animal farming or livestock is one of the biggest causes of land degradation, and by extension of soil erosion and deterioration, which is directly threatening the availability of food, essential for human survival. Now, some schools of thought believe that it's contributing significantly to the ozone layer, the depletion of the ozone layer by the methane gas that especially from the cow poop, the methane gas that is given off from the animal waste as well. So these are some things to keep in the back of our minds, except to say that in our small environment, we really don't produce enough livestock to be worried about contributing methane gas and those high levels into the ozone layer and so on. This is more for the bigger countries of the world. All right? And we should always, if we're going to deal with livestock, have good practices that will preserve the soil. We've seen on our small footprint that there's lots of overgrazing. We should always have the right amount of animals, not to overcrowd our space so that we have overgrazing. We should practice rotational grazing so that we don't expose the topsoil too much. And, you know, the sustainable grazing practices that keep animals on pasture can stimulate root growth, producing more carbon, more biomass below ground, building humus and storing carbon in the soil. Increasing the root mass in soil is key, not only to retain water and reduce erosion, but also to make the land more resilient against floods and droughts. And that's why we keep advocating that we should always have some kind of cover on the ground so that we don't expose the soil to erosion. Guys, sorry, excuse me a little bit. In my study, and my windows are open, and the flies from the rain just started to come in their numbers. So I got distracted there for a bit. But in terms of the soil health itself, that brings me to the end of the lecture session. And I'm hopeful that we could really have an interactive session now with questions, answers, observations, some of the challenges, or some of the things that you do to mitigate against the harsh weather conditions and to preserve your soil. We have, by my last count, 58 participants, and I think we should, not only today, but going forward, use this chat and the classroom itself to form the network and the network that would help each and every one of us. None of us know it all, but if we bounce ideas and knock the heads together, we would be able to help one another as we spend the next 8 weeks together. And I would encourage you as well to be open. And here, there's no stupid question here. As farmers, we learn and we keep learning. From day to day, I find easier methods to do things. I do a lot of research, and I'm always willing to share what I learn with others, no matter if they're in the same space as me, because I look at it this way. If we're all able to produce quality fruits and vegetables, then we really don't need to import the crap that we get from the US and further afield. The other thing is we all become healthier and live in a healthier society as well. So having said all of that, I would implore you to use the raise hand button, ask your questions, make your comments, and let's have a lively discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Maki. Actually, we had two questions that came in during your presentation. The first was from Ms. Bronte Tucker. Some farmers practice tilling as a means of weed control. What other method would you advise these farmers to implement?
Okay. In terms of weed control, we could implement mulching. Now we have organic mulching, which is the grass and for example, the leaves from the trees. I mentioned the banana flagging, as we call it here in St. Kitts and Nevis. When you trim the banana trees, you just leave the leaves right there. That would suppress the weeds as well. And then in terms of the inorganic, we have what we call the ground cover. And the ground cover definitely would reduce weed. It's almost like a weed mat. It prevents weeds from growing. It is a little bit expensive if you going to use it, say, throughout. But what I've seen farmers do is over time, just keep adding a roll and just keep adding a roll, and eventually you'll get there. So you could use mulching, grass and leaves and so on. And that's the organic way, which I would recommend. And you could also use the ground cover or the matting to suppress the weeds. What have we been using, ladies?
Okay. Actually, Maki, so we have two questions within the chat, and then ladies, I implore you, if you do have questions and you want to speak rather than writing in the chat, use the raised hand function. So after the two questions in the chat, Akisha, you will be able to ask your question. So we will go to the question from Miss Antoinette Evelyn. But what about produce? Okay. What about produce we take seeds from imported products that have been grown from a GMO seed? Some people would sow those seeds.
Sorry, Kitten, I had to relocate because I was getting swamped in that room by some flies, I think, from the light.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, so sorry, could you repeat that one?
No problem. Simply put, it was a question, I think, regarding the section on seeds. Someone asked about seeds from imported products that have been grown using GMO seeds. I guess the question is, can persons actually sow these seeds?
No, well, the GMO seeds, I don't think they would reproduce like that from plant. They're genetically modified, so they won't. I don't think they would germinate like that at all. I really haven't had any first-hand experiences with them, but I think that's a no-no in terms of germination. So those seeds come directly from the lab, not from a fruit, because usually what happens is that just like the hybrid seeds, they would revert to the original parent plant. So I don't think that the GMO seed, I could probably do some research for the next class, but I don't think that the GMO seeds would from a fruit would germinate.
Okay. Thank you. Next question comes from, okay, so we have quite a few. Next question comes from Miss Indira Fritz. How can you identify good quality seeds that you have to source from overseas?
Basically, what we have to do is buy seeds from trusted seed companies. We know that we've heard of Paramount Seeds, we've heard of Johnny Seeds, and there are a few others. When you travel and you walk into, say, a Home Depot, and you see some pack of seeds and so on, those are really not the ideal seeds. If you're just doing something in your backyard, that's fine. But if you're doing, say, lettuce commercially, you would want to buy your seeds from a trusted seed company such that you know exactly what you're getting. And from one harvest to the next, your produce is consistent. The color is consistent, the foliage is consistent, the taste is consistent, and so on. So once you're doing commercial farming, you definitely would want to have your seeds coming from a reputable, trusted seed company.
Thank you. And I will go, since we're on seeds, I will skip to Miss Abigail Christopher's question, and then I will go to Julian Nisbet. Then we will go to those with the raised hand functions and back to the chat. So Abigail's question goes, you mentioned when sowing seeds in a seed tray to keep them in a dark place until they germinate and then expose them to light. What is the best practice when it comes to transplanting your seedlings in terms of exposing them to direct sunlight?
Okay, what I would advise is that you do what we call harden the seeds. So you would take them out to direct sunlight, maybe part of the day at first, say in the morning, lunchtime, you take them back inside. The next day, you maybe leave them out for another 2 hours. And then, so you go from 4 hours to 5 hours to 6 hours to 7 hours, a full day, and then you're ready to direct to plant, because that way the seedling itself would climatize to the outside environment. And so when you plant it, it would stand up much better. It wouldn't burn or wilt or anything like that. That is what we call a hardening stage. So you expose it gradually to direct sunlight, especially if you're going to plant it outside, before taking it out and giving it a big shock. If you shock it, sometimes the shock is so intense that plant just withers away. Sometimes the plant is able to go down and catch itself and come back, but you want to try to avoid that, because that initial shock really will take a toll on the plant in a very young stage.
Okay. Miss Julian Nisbet's question is the black ground cover okay to use?
Yeah, it is. There's a couple different types of mulch. There's a plastic mulch, white and black plastic mulch, and then there's a ground cover, the black ground cover. If I would recommend the black ground cover over the plastic mulch. The black ground cover allows a lot of seepage and seepage of moisture. So when rain falls, it allows the water to go through. The plastic mulch is plastic and the water just runs off. And so the ground really doesn't breathe properly under the plastic mulch either. But both of them would suppress weeds. But my preference is the black ground cover.
Okay, great. And we will go to Jody, Ms. Jody Titley, who had her hand up.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Hi, Maki.
Hi.
So my question is, well, a kind of comment and a question together, right? So around when the whole corona came about, right? What I had done was cleared the piece of land, the little section that I have, right? And I planted some sorrel. And it did very well, you know. I don't know if it was because it was the first time I cleared it, the soil and so it was very good. But then, you know, over time, this, you know, the season passed and I didn't plant anything there. So now I'm going back to, you know, trying to plant something and I find the soil is very, very hard. So I don't know if it's a situation where because I wasn't maintaining it and that type of thing, why it is like that now. So I kind of want to know what is the best thing I can use to kind of get it back to, I mean, if not back to original, but you know, to a good quality. And then you spoke, before you answer, you spoke something about the earthworms. Will those function similar to the manure or is a different type of, you know, or they do different things? Thanks.
So the second question first, the earthworms and the manure, two different, they do two different things. The earthworms really make the soil more aerated and it allows water to infiltrate a lot easier. Whereas the manure is almost, it's organic matter, so it adds nutrients to the soil. And so once the organic matter add the nutrients to the soil, then the earthworm is happy as well, because the earthworm gets a good habitat. And so the earthworm thrive, the soil gets better, and it's a win-win situation, but they do two different things. Now, in terms of the hardness of the soil, was the soil covered with grass or anything like that, or it was just left exposed?
Well,
Because
it was exposed, and then you know the grass grew up and that type of thing. But then I went again and cleared it with the intention that I was going to do a similar thing, you know. But it just did not. It is not the same. You know, you don't have the same consistency and that type of thing as it did before.
well, what I would encourage you to do is add some manure to it, whatever you have, whether it's cow, rabbit, chicken, but make sure that the manure is cured. Manure that is not cured is very, very dangerous to plants. The nitrogen levels are very high, and that would actually burn most plants, especially leafy green. It could also introduce bacteria to your crops as well. You would see some black spots on leafy greens and all of that kind of stuff. All right. So
okay, thank you.
Add some manure and you should be good to go.
Okay, thanks.
Here we go then to Miss Akisha Fergus, and then we go back to the chat. Akisha, you can.
Hi. At what point do you start covering your crop as they grow? For example, if I'm planting watermelon and you know sometimes the vine is, what should I say, weak, to preserve that water being lost when the drip system is on, at what point do you start to use that covering with grass or whatever, mulching, whatever it is? At what point do you start to use it so that the vine roots itself could hold stronger and maybe produce more?
Well, the thing is, mulching is encouraged from the time you plant, because what the mulch does, the mulch holds the moisture longer in the soil, such that if you plant, say, watermelon, and the watermelon is ready to run off, you want to mulch before it runs off, because you or runs off too much, because you don't want to be want to have to step on the vines. When you step on the vines, then you introduce a different problem. So when you mulch around the root system such that you hold the moisture for longer period of time inside of the hole where the watermelon is planted or whatever you're planting. So as soon as you could mulch, go right ahead. Because what the mulching does as well is that it helps to protect against weeds. Remember, we spoke about two types of mulch, the organic mulch and the inorganic mulch. So what I think you most likely would use, but it really doesn't matter which one. But if you're going to use the matting or the inorganic mulch, that would go down and has to go down before you plant, such that, because remember, it's just a little hole you're going to bore in that, and then you would plant the watermelon seed or seedling, as the case may be. But the organic mulch can be added same time you plant or shortly thereafter. The quicker you add it, the better it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we will go to the chat now, and then Tracy, just give us a few moments. We'll go back to you once we're done with the chat. So Maki, we have a question from Ms. Julie Bedford. I have a small backyard space. What is the best way to maximize the space?
Wow. it really, without seeing the actual space and stuff, it's very difficult to give any one answer. But what I would encourage, though, is to use a crop of high density. For example, pak choy, lettuce, something that you could put a lot into a small space and have a quick turnover. So short crops and crops that would not take up a lot of space. So lettuce, pak choy, kale, even string beans, something of that nature. Those, to me, would be more viable and more productive in a smaller space than if you're going to say you're going to turn to something like papaya or potato or something like that. That would require a lot more space. So you look at the space and you see how best you could maximize that space. I would say, yep, something that has that you could plant more dense than other crops like lettuce, kale, beets, that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Miss Therese. I hope I'm saying that right. Dor. How can I tell if the soil in my yard is ideal for planting? That's another.
No, that's actually a good one. You could look at the soil itself. The darker the soil, the better it is in terms of health, in terms of, the old people would say, fatness, in terms of richness, in terms of quality. If you realize that the soil is light brown, then it means the soil is lacking organic matter and it's lacking nutrients and so on. The scientific way, though, is to take a sample and take it to the agriculture department and have them analyze the soil for you. I'm hoping that they're still offering that service. I am not 100% sure. But if you yourself is not certain, add some compost, some manure into the soil before you plant. You can't go wrong by adding manure, but make sure, I can't stress this enough, Keithlin, that the manure is well cured, because if not, you'd be adding fuel to fire, really.
Okay, thank you. moving along because we have quite a few questions from
Certainly, I
Miss
love it.
I know, right? From Miss Tracy Frazier, what's your take on the McDonald's Farmer's Almanac? That's a good
It
one.
has its place. I don't use it as often as I should because I've got a schedule that I have to really stick to. But the full moon is in 2 days, and usually 2 days before and 2 days after the full moon. I grew up with this from my dad, and I know it works. It's a good time for planting. So you would realize that a lot of people tomorrow, the next day, right up until the weekend, will be planting a lot of sorrel, especially because this is the time when they plant sorrel to come in for Christmas. But having said all of that, sorrel now, as we know it, is a all year round crop. When I was growing up, sorrel was a Christmas drink, but now you could get sorrel all year round. But I'm back to the McDonald Almanac. Yes, it has its place. A lot of people swears by it, and yes, to me it works. But I plant lettuce twice a week. So whether it's in favor with the almanac or not, I have to. So when I could, I use it. When I can't, I just go ahead and say my prayers and and go from there. You know. But my mom and my dad swears everything works by the moon, so it's a cycle. Yeah. But I don't necessarily use it on a daily basis. Like I say, I have certain schedules, and I guess maybe in my environment where I plant mostly lettuce, it really doesn't matter. And I haven't seen any difference to note if I plant before the moon or after the moon, on a new moon or on a full moon when it comes to lettuce. Now, some people would tell you that outdoor farming, yes, they would stick with the almanac, and I try as much as possible to go that route as well. But sometimes you still have to do what you have to do.
Great message. From Miss Beryl Seaton, will planting on the black matting cause root rot if water settles under the matting?
Not really, because what happens is that the matting provides some aeration as well. So once water, what the matting does is that the matting holds, well, help to retain moisture in the soil. Now, if the soil is waterlogged, that's a different story. But if you have a well-drained soil, you shouldn't be having those issues at all. But that really, to me, is more than a matting issue. That is a function of the soil not draining the moisture.
Okay. We have quite a few questions in the chat, but I will give those with their hands up a chance. So first we'll have Tracy and then Nilissa, and we'll go back to the chat. Tracy, you can go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Good evening. Yep.
Wonderful. I have a small backyard garden, and as you can hear by my accent, I'm doing the English way. I use all my vegetable matter and put it in the garden. However, I am trying to do a compost heap where all the vegetable matter goes in there with worms that I have to get to make compost. Is that a better way than putting the raw material in the ground? Because when we put it in the ground, we have things grow, squash, okra, anything basically that grows up there because it's the raw material. So I wanted to know if I can do it my way instead of the way they do it here. Use my words carefully. That was my question.
Hi, Tracy, thanks for that, and thanks for the gift that you dropped off today. The compost is a better way to go in terms of a physical compost, and then when it's rotted, then you put it into the soil. Now, if you had a big open field, then I would say, yeah, you could put the kitchen peel and so on right in the ground and let it rot. But the best way to go is to do the actual compost itself, because when you spread it out there like that, as you said, you never know what you're gonna get. Apart from the okra, which you could probably slip out and put someplace else, you might get some tomatoes and so on. But what you would also get is an attraction of rodents like rats and so on. And you really don't want that. So what you really want to do is have that compost and let it rot, and then use the organic matter from the bottom. I know you're going to turn it and so on, but if you leave it there naturally, it would rot from the bottom, comes up, and then come to the top. So let it rot and then use it that way. That way for sure you have good organic matter, and you don't have the issue of getting okra trees when you really didn't plant okra trees.
And if that's a plastic container, I can do it in a plastic bin, because there is
Yeah,
some
you could do
plastic bins that they
you-
sell with the compost lever at the bottom. So you put everything in, and then you just open the lever at the bottom, and all the compost comes out already.
Exactly. You just pull it out from the bottom when you're ready for it.
Yeah, because that's the small
Yeah,
space.
make sure you keep it covered at the top as well.
Yes, I have cats, so there's no rodent problem. I have cats.
Oh, okay, but good.
Okay
Good.
then.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no problem.
Nelisa, you can go ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening, Melissa.
I am asking a question because I do container farming, which means I can't really go into the land and plant as I would like to. But anyway, I am trying something. So my question is, how many times can you use that soil within the same container? And as the lady before me was mentioning compost, I was also trying a thing when it comes to, let's say, if you leave something you bought, a vegetable or something in the fridge too long and it starts to spoil, I'm thinking, okay, I can incorporate it on top with that soil, not necessarily try to dig it up yet, let it rot that way, and hopefully it would work. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you could do it that way too. But it's better in the compost environment in the container. And then when it rot completely, then you put it into the soil. Now, in terms of the container farming, good move, especially if you don't have a lot of space. I would tell you right now that I've got maybe close to 10,000 heads of lettuce in containers, because all my lettuce are grown in pots. And each lettuce would take about 42 days from seed to maturity. So every 50 days, a new lettuce go into that same pot. And I would probably change the soil maybe after a year. Some I've got to go up to about 2 years and change. But the thing is, I've been adding maybe every 3 months a scoop of rabbit manure to each pot. And that really regenerates the nutrients and add some organic matter to the soil as well. So, and it really depends on what you're planting in the pots, because as you would imagine, the lettuce, especially lettuce and kale, don't have deep roots. So they really don't feed down into the bottom of the pot. In terms of tomato and sweet pepper, they would go down to the bottom of the pot. So you probably would, well, their lifespan is a lot longer as well, because in the greenhouse environment, the tomato and the pepper would basically produce for about 6 months steady. So every time that we would replant tomato and pepper, we would add some organic matter, some manure, cured manure to those pots, and we're good to go. So we really don't change the soil that often, but what we do is we nourish the soil by adding organic matter on a consistent basis, as in the case of tomatoes and sweet peppers every time we plant, which is twice a year, and maybe every 3 months in terms of the lettuce and the kale.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maki. So we'll keep it rolling. Just an observation from Beryl Seaton. I had some pineapple that rotted and died when planted on the matted ground cover.
You know, I've seen the same pineapple in St. Kitts, forget what that area is called. It's down by the Holiday Inn, past St. Paul's, before you get to, somebody help me there, before you get back to Sandy Point. There's a government outreach center somewhere down there. I've seen them do pineapple on a large scale there under matting. And that has been very, very successful. So some other factor came into play. Whether the hole wasn't big enough and the heat from the matting, I really don't know, I'm guessing here. But I've seen pineapples grown down there, especially. Is New Guinea? Who's from St. Kitts? The government outreach farm between St. Paul's and I think it's Sandy Point.
Echo Park, the Echo Park.
No, not the Echo Park.
Newton Ground?
Yeah. It's close enough to where Denny's have a greenhouse. The government have an outreach.
It's the FIS Outreach Center.
Exactly. They've got a big, thank you for that. They've got a big pineapple, plot there that they supply the pineapple suckers to different farmers in the area. And they've been growing the pineapples on matting very successfully. So if you're in that area, you might want to have a pass there and see what they're doing right, and then apply that to your own situation. Okay?
Okay. Moving along, which manure is best? Well, which animal manure is best for seedlings?
Seedlings, you really don't want to be putting seedlings in manure yet. And I tell you why. The seedlings, okay, the seed itself usually have enough nutrients within the embryo of the seed to produce the seedling. Now, yes, you might want to boost it a little bit, but be very careful. Usually what happens to those seedlings is after transplant, then is when I would recommend that you add manure. Not in the very young seedling stage itself. What you can do there is add some inorganic fertilizers, something like Miracle Grow, that is very friendly to seedlings. You just need a tablespoon to the 5 gallon or something like that. But you really don't want to have too much manure when it comes to the actual seedling itself. But if I'm to use any, maybe just a sprinkle of chicken manure, make sure it's very pure. And it's almost like a sand effect, very granular. All right. But the manure really comes in after transplant when you're trying to get it to root and to take off. If you have to use manure in the seedling stage, please use it very, very sparingly, because some of those manure are strong and can have adverse effect on the plants. Yeah.
How long, from Miss Paulette Brown, how long is the curing period for sheep manure?
Well, it's difficult to answer that because it's difficult. But I would imagine not less than 2 months. You would want to take it out of the pen and have it out in the open for at least 2 months before you use it. That should take care of the curing process. A lot of times what happens is that the urine in the manure is what really causes the burning of the plants and so on. So by putting it out there and let it dry out and stuff, you get the rid of most of that potent urine that is part of the manure itself. So I would say at least 2 months drying out should take care of it. But a lot of times you would realize when the manure is cured, it turns a different color and texture. It gets really, really, really dark. Really, really, really dark. Almost like, and it turns almost like soil, turns into almost like soil. Sometimes you can't even tell the difference whether it's manure or soil. That way, this manure is cured.
Okay. Okay,
Let me just put in here while we're talking about manure. If you want to use, if you're really stuck and you need to use some manure, the rabbit manure is one of the few that you could use in its raw state, because when you look at the pellets, most of maybe because of the small size, they dry out very, very quickly. The only word of caution again here is that if the manure is soaked with urine, then you have to let it dry out. But usually the urine would go one way and the pellets would go the other way if you've got it set up properly. Go ahead, Keaton, sorry.
No worries, thank you. So what are your thoughts about fruits and vegetable composting before planting?
Yeah, well, the thing is, if you've got good compost, once you've transplant, then you could add the compost to the newly planted plants. Yes, I've seen where in open field people would add the compost and the manure to the soil, turn it over, and then plant. That's okay too. But to add the manure directly to the seedling before it's ready for transplanting is dangerous. The plant is not strong enough to absorb all of that nutrients and probably would succumb to the intensity of the manure. You really don't want to take that chance at all.
Okay. When I had from Desiree Ward Carey, when I had my backyard garden, I used stuff like rosemary, basil, and marigold to help me control the pests, which is fantastic. I sprayed the plants with neem water, cayenne pepper, and dish liquid, and it worked for me. So a recommendation.
Good. I've heard those stories, which are very good stories.
So Darian Wilkinson, what crops would you recommend can be grown without much plowing?
Well, interesting question, because there's a gentleman, I think he's out of Texas, not 100% sure, by the name of Gabe Brown. And he's all over write that down, please. Gabe Brown. You guys could Google him. He is doing a lot of lectures on no-till, which is zero plowing. And his belief, well, I've seen it firsthand. The less you plow, the better it is, because you really don't disturb the soil structure and the microbes in the soil and so on. But what you'd have to do is to dig right where you're going to plant adequate enough so that it could support the different plants that you're going to be planting. For example, say you're going to be planting potato. The potato goes below ground, so you're going to need to dig maybe about 2 feet square to plant that potato, because that potato the vine would need adequate room to grow and to expand, and it needs a loose enough soil. Now, if you're going to plant, say, tomato, then you really don't need to dig that much to plant a tomato, because the tomato root really doesn't expand as much as the potato. So about 1 foot would be ideal. And then you really don't have to disturb the soil for another 2 feet, because most tomato spacing are like 18 inches to 24 inches apart. So you really don't have to turn up the soil in between there. And so you have the luxury of having that soil intact between the different root structures. And I think that is a real plus. I've done it up at Zetlands successfully, and with good results as well. So yeah, I think that is something, and that is where most of the scientists are leaning towards. Most of the scientists now are leaning towards low tillage, zero plowing, that kind of thing. But you know, bear in mind, when they say zero, you still have to dig enough space to plant whatever you're planting. And the size of hole that you dig really is proportional to whatever crop you're going to be planting.
Thank you, Mackie. Boy, I love sessions like this, because normally we have to probe people, but my God, leave it to them. We'll leave home at 10. Yeah.
It's all good.
All right, so we're gonna keep the questions rolling. What advice would you give on using grow bags to plant short crops and best soil to use?
Well, I've seen people using the grow bags, and it is a really good technique, especially when you don't have the luxury of a big backyard and so on. In terms of soil, you really need a loam soil, a well-drained soil, because remember, it's contained in a space. And so you really want the soil to be loose enough and well-drained and so on. But yeah, I've seen it, and I love it, because people who usually don't have that extra space to plant outdoors now can use them on the balconies and on the verandas and so on, with good good returns as well. So sure.
Okay. Okay. We talked about this actually, about manure, but there was a question on how do you cure manure, which is more general.
Well, you just leave it out in the open space. It cures itself. The natural environment takes care of it. Because what you want is that you want it exposed to the elements, the sun and the rain and the wind and everything else. And usually when you do that, you would, and it's cure, you would, once you start digging it up, you'd realize, because you would have all of the, what I would term the earth life, the worms, the earthworms and the crickets and everything else in there. That way, you know, because they won't be a part of that if it's not starting to cure. So you just leave it out and you monitor it. And once you're going to use it and you start to dig, and you see earthworms and you see some black worms, and you see crickets and you see all of those things, then you know you're onto something good. So nature will take care of it.
Always does.
Yeah.
All right. Next question, moving fast. Do you encourage raised beds? How deep should these beds be?
It really depends on what you're planting. If you're planting carrots, you definitely need 12 inches plus. And I would dare say you go down to at least 18 inches if you're planting carrots, because carrots would go straight down. Now, if you're planting lettuce, 6 inches is more than adequate, because the lettuce root is not going to go more than 2.5 inches. Right? So it really depends what you're doing in the raised bed. Now, if you're doing sweet potato in a raised bed, then yeah, 6 inches won't cut it. You need to double that plus. So it really depends on what you're planting. Look at the root system and then make that determination. If you're planting like tap roots, carrots, beets, and so on in the raised bed, then you want at least 18 inches deep. If you're just planting lettuce, 6 inches is more than adequate. Lettuce, kale might be 8 to 10, you know, but yeah, it really depends on the root structure and what type of crops you're planting. If you're doing, say, tomato, the roots are not that deep, so, you know, you'll get away with 10, 12 inches. Same with bell peppers, just enough to support the root structure. So, you know, there's no one answer. I can't say 12 inches and across the board. It really depends on the crop that you're planting, but I hope I shed enough light on that for you to make a good judgment.
Okay. Wonderful. Nelisa, I noticed that your hand is up, so we're just going to try to go through the questions in the chat since you've already asked a question, and then we'll get to you. Next question from Ms. Julianne Nisbet. How can vertical farming improve my farming space?
Well, vertical farming allows you to put more into the same footprint, really. Have to be careful. Footnote here. You may have to introduce some grow lights, because sometimes really depends on the design. Once you start going up, you start to shelter other crops. So yes, the good thing about vertical farming is that if the design is right, you could put a lot more on the same small footprint. Sometimes I've seen where people, have actually tripled the amount of plants they have in the same square foot area. So vertical farming is a very, very good option. But you have to have a very, very good design depending on what you're doing, so that one plant doesn't shade the next. Because remember, one of the key elements is sunlight or light. We were told sunlight, but now we know it's light because we have all of these new technologies with these artificial lights and so on. So that is the only word of caution with the vertical farming. You may have to get a very good design and consider using some grow lights. And that's about it. But yes, you'd be able to put up to 3 times more on the same footprint, 3 times more plus more, if there's such a thing. But at least 3 times more on the same footprint, which is a real plus, especially if you're cramped for space.
I really
And
love.
usually with the vertical farming to short crops, leafy greens, lettuce, pak choy. I haven't seen callaloo, but I've seen kale, and I've seen what else have I seen? Oh, I've seen some basil as well. Yeah, so that is good. That is good. They have
Really
some
love
ready-made
this.
systems as well in a kitchen.
Pardon?
They have some ready-made systems as well.
Ah, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Maybe it's something we can even look into.
Yeah. And the hydroponics.
Yeah, the hydroponics we
Yeah.
did some and they're actually fairly easy to craft, the small
Mhm.
systems at least.
Right. Yeah.
But I love these questions because I find that we're moving from traditional agriculture to more modern agriculture.
Exactly.
And that's quite exciting. So kudos to
Yeah.
you, ladies. I love where your mind is at. So again, a very non-traditional question. Is container gardening considered beneficial?
I make a blanket statement. All gardening is considered beneficial. Container garden, there's a big push on container gardening. The drawback is that the startup capital is very, very high. And the upkeep is high as well, but the turnover can be quite rewarding. Just like similar to greenhouses, the upfront cost is expensive, but if you do it right and you manage it properly, it can have great reward. The only other footnote is, and is along the same expense line, Keithlin, is that the rate of electricity in St. Kitts and Nevis is very high. And that would be one of your biggest costs because your lights would be 24/7s, your pumps would be 24/7s, and so these are, and your water pump, and the water would be recycled anyway, so you won't use that much water. But your electricity costs, that is something that I really don't have a handle on, except to say I know it would be expensive. I've never done it, and I've never gotten any feedback. I don't think there was a project in St. Kitts, and I think they had abandoned it because of the electricity cost that was involved. Mine, if my memory serves me right, yeah, the cooling, I forget that, because it's in a container and we're in the tropics, that they must be cooled 24/7s as well. So your electricity cost is almost like a deterrent. I haven't done an analysis to say, well, listen, apart from the electricity, you would make enough to compensate for that and some. I really can't say, but it's a good concept. If somebody could bring the numbers to the table and let us see if it's viable, then. But I guess maybe another way that I could approach this and get back to the class is to see what the general consumption is in terms of kilowatt hours, and then put a figure to each kilowatt hour and see what the electricity bill would be like. But in those containers, you could vertical farming, you could put a lot of stuff into a 40-foot container. But like I said, the footnote for me would be the cost of electricity, especially because the cooling factor and the light factor. The light would generate heat as well. So, you know, that cooling and lighting simultaneously is something to consider.
Thank you, Maki. Actually, there is an example of vertical farming, well, using the containers in particular in Barbados. And like you rightly said, Maki, I believe they use solar panels
Okay.
for the utility costs
Yeah.
because, yeah, it can be super expensive if you
Mm-hmm.
don't.
Yeah.
I will try to see if I can. There was a video on what they're doing. I can try to find the information and send it in the WhatsApp group. So, ladies, considering the time, we're going to take the last 3 questions and then
Oh,
close
didn't
for the
even
evening. So we will take the last 3 from Abigail, then we'll go to Desiree, and then finally to Nelisa. So Abigail's question, which is quite interesting, someone suggested using human urine to add nutrients to plants. What is your take on that? My mind ran first to the medications we use as humans take.
Well, I really can't speak to that. I have no research, not first-hand knowledge. But I don't know. I really can't speak to that at all. I'm just thinking while I'm talking. There may be some benefits in the actual urine itself. I'll have to check that out. I'll have to check that out. Yeah.
Okay. Moving along. Okay, so from Desiree, ants in compost, is that a good sign?
Well, it depends on what kind of ants. If it's the fire ants, well, we got a real problem. But once you have the thing is the peel and so on would definitely attract ants in its raw state, especially if you got sweet stuff like papaya and sugarcane and so on. But once that starts to rot, then you really shouldn't have an ants problem unless you keep adding, papaya and mango and that's kind of sweet, sweet tasting fruits and so on. Usually you'd see that if the compost is fresh, but I haven't seen it to the bottom of the compost where it's really starting to rot and so on. So unless you see it down there, then I wouldn't worry about the ants to the top because they're just, to me, following the pulp or the sap or whatever is sweet. But after a while, no.
Got it. And finally, we will close off the session with the last question from Nelisa. You can go ahead, Nelisa.
Hi again. So I'm just wondering, is it smart to have more than one plant in the same container? Let's say, for example, if you have a container with more than one tomato plant in it, is that something you would recommend?
And you raise the perfect plant too, Melissa, because most of the Dutch bucket systems in the greenhouses have 2 tomato plants in them. Word of caution, the tomato, the bucket or the medium, you want at least 12 inches wide between the 2 plants. What happened in terms of tomato, because the tomato plant is like a vine. You could prune the tomato plant and have 2 plants coming up from the same container, no problem at all. But what you need to do is take off what we call take off all the side shoots. so such that you have a straight vine going up. Now, why I say take the side shoots off is that if you have two plants going up, you really want the ear to pass through as well. You don't want it too bushy. You want the ear to pass through. And if you're gonna grow two plants in a pot, you would have to have some kind of trellis system, a string, and then just wind the tomato plant around the string. In order for you to do that, like I said, you would have to take out the side shoots, and prevent it from becoming too bushy. And that way we do some cucumbers the same way. We trellis them, take out the side shoots, and we send them up just like a vine. And because you take the side shoots out, the fruit that the tomato would bear would be so much bigger generally than if you had left the side shoots in. Now, be minded that there's two types of tomatoes. One of them you grow outdoor, which is what they call a determinate species. It might bear for about 3-4 weeks at a time maximum. And the species that we use in the shade house, greenhouse environment is the indeterminate species. That one they would grow over the lifespan, maybe up to 30-40 feet, depending on the management. And it would show out a cluster of tomatoes, maybe every second leaf that it goes up, and it just bears continuously until the yields start to drop off in maybe about 6 months' time. So yes, you can plant 2 tomato seedlings in the same container, providing that you have, I would say, maybe 10 to 12 inches between them. And then, once they grow up, then you could kind of separate them, especially if you're going to prune the tomatoes. That would work well. Now, the other thing is, you've got some plants that like company, like sorrel. You would plant 3, 4, 5 sorrel in the same hole. Seasoned pepper, you do the same thing. But like sweet pepper, you would only want 1 in a hole because it bunches so much. It won't, that one don't like company at all. So you have to know the characteristics of the plants. But Melissa, you mentioned a good one, tomato. You could definitely plant, and I would recommend planting 2 tomato seedlings in the same container once you have that spacing between there, and you could trellis them up. Only footnote I would tell you is pruning. And if you're planting the outdoor tomato, you would just prune maybe about halfway up, because what would happen is that after that tomato plant reaches about 4 feet, it would stop, go up, and it would just branch off. So you would allow it to just branch off at the top. All right, guys?
All right. Guys, I thank you so much for really the active interest and engagement. Maki, this is not his first time around, so he has definitely seen groups where we need to kind of pull the questions out. Congratulations. Yeah, this was very easy. And I think the level of the questions as well really has us excited. So ladies, you gave us an extra half an hour of your time. I want to thank you so much. We will see you once again, same time, 6 p.m. on Thursday. In the meantime, tomorrow, Thursday, we will try to have the presentation uploaded on a Google Drive and a link sent out to you, along with the recording as well. So ladies, thank you again for entrusting us in this process. Seems like a great start, so let's end on a high as well, and have a wonderful evening. Take care, everyone, and thank you most of all to Maki for such an excellent, excellent session. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
My pleasure, Caitlin. My pleasure. Good night.
Night. Bye-bye.
Yeah.